Greetings everyone, here are the main topics in today's video. The red line has been torn apart, Putin's historic move, and a direct nuclear threat aimed at Tokyo. For the first time in 26 years in power, the head of the Kremlin has directly landed on the disputed Kuril Islands, sparking a diplomatic earthquake filled with the smell of gunpowder right under Japan's nose. The Russian and Chinese pincer is tightening, with plans to strangle the Northeast Asian seas and push back the US Navy. The unprecedented coordination between strategic bombers and carrier-killer missile systems is turning the waters around Japan into a deadly zone of destruction, ready to cut off every vital supply line of the West. The war machine awakens as Japan strikes back with a devastating long-range attack, destroying and shedding its post-World War II peaceful image. Tokyo has launched a record defense budget of $58 billion USD, deploying Tomahawk cruise missiles, ready to deliver devastating retaliatory strikes deep into enemy territory, targeting American missile supercomplexes and strategic positions. The countdown to a full-scale confrontation has begun, as multi-domain firepower systems and American nuclear submarine fleets simultaneously activate the security treaty mechanism. Just a small spark in the Pacific is enough to ignite a global war. Welcome to the analysis program of Luat Ban Chen Su. Here are the details. We hope you can take a few seconds to like the video and subscribe to the channel to support the team. Thank you, dear viewers. Putin's historic move and his direct nuclear threat to Tokyo, the Russian pincer. China tightens its grip. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the inherent silence of the Pacific Ocean was suddenly torn apart by the imposing shadow of the guided missile cruiser belonging to the Russian Pacific Fleet. Right after a series of strong statements directly targeting Tokyo on August 12, Vladimir Putin made a move that shocked everyone. For the first time in his 26 years of leadership, he personally set foot on the disputed Kuril Islands, a land that Japan calls the Northern Territories and firmly asserts as its inviolable sovereignty, suddenly becoming the focal point of an uncompromising confrontation. The Kremlin leader's inspection trip to the Yasny seafood processing plant on Iturup Island, where he tasted the specialty caviar of the Sakhalin region, then visited the Kuril District General Hospital and a local school. At first glance, it seemed like just a civilian visit. But in reality, it was a blatant show of force in front of the entire Western alliance, openly crossing the thinnest red lines in the Pacific. This symbolic move immediately triggered a fierce diplomatic earthquake in Tokyo, in front of the international media. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi firmly declared that the visit was a completely unacceptable act. The unusually tough tone in the Japanese leader's voice was the clearest sign that Tokyo's most sensitive nerve had been touched and that they would no longer remain patient. At the same time,
Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi immediately summoned the Russian ambassador to deliver a strong protest note, reaffirming to the world that Iturup and the neighboring islands are an inseparable part of Japan, both historically and under international law. However,
the response from Moscow completely lacked the usual diplomatic etiquette, and instead reeked of gunpowder. Deputy Chairman of the Russian Security Council Dmitry Medvedev issued a statement with a strong nuclear deterrence undertone, affirming that the Kuril Islands will forever belong to Russia, and any force daring to challenge this reality will have to bear unpredictable and catastrophic consequences. That chilling warning officially broke the last links of dialogue between the two countries. A complex strategic question arises. Why, at a time when all resources are being poured into the brutal war of attrition in Ukraine, does Putin actively ignite a risky second front in the Pacific? The answer lies in a harsh reality. Moscow is not alone. This bold move is actually part of a carefully calculated joint operational plan that has been coordinated with Beijing for months. The two continental powers have simultaneously pressed the button to activate a massive strategic pincer aimed at strangling Japan. This is not simply a tool for political pressure, but the actual implementation of the Anti-Access and Area Denial Doctrine, or A2/AD, designed with the core goal of thoroughly preventing US naval intervention if a full-scale conflict breaks out. From the southwest, Beijing continuously increases suffocating military pressure on Tokyo through the hotspots of the Taiwan Strait and the Senkaku Islands. The most powerful stealth destroyer fleet, Type 055 of the Chinese Navy, maintain constant patrols, sending a warning signal that they can blockade the vital maritime routes, sustaining Japan's economy at any time. But it didn't stop there. The arsenal of DF-21D and DF-26 anti-ship ballistic missiles of the Chinese military is ready to turn the waters south of Japan into a destruction zone for US carrier strike groups. This military encirclement is further backed by a critical economic blow as Beijing tightens the export of vital rare earth resources, the lifeblood of Japan's defense industry. Meanwhile, to the north, Russia continuously probes deeper into Japan's defensive flanks around Hokkaido and the Kuril Islands. Moscow has turned this chain of islands into an impregnable floating fortress by densely integrating Bastion P coastal missile complexes and advanced S-300V4 air defense shields. In reality,
Lands like Iturup and Kunashir are not barren lands, but rather strategic bastions that turn the Sea of Okhotsk into an absolutely secure nuclear sanctuary for Russia's strategic submarine fleet. If these islands were to fall under Japanese control, the US Navy would have a direct gateway into the heart of Russia's nuclear deterrent in the Pacific to hunt down ballistic missile submarines. Therefore, Putin's presence here is a strong message to Washington that Russia is personally locking the escape route to the ocean for its strategic nuclear submarines, the Labore class. This risky and dangerous strategy has gone beyond paper battle plans and is being put to the test directly in the ocean. The clearest evidence is the large-scale joint patrol lasting more than 2 weeks between Russian and Chinese warships in East Asian waters. In the operational airspace above, the squadrons of H-6K strategic missile bombers from China and Tuesday 95 MS from Russia deliberately locked onto Japan's air defense radar systems, pushing the war of nerves to its peak of tension. The Japanese military's detection of this deadly combat formation approaching the southern boundary of Hokkaido on July 25 was a clear warning that a period of extreme turbulence and uncertainty has truly engulfed the entire region. The Northeast Asian Seas. The joint firepower display had just concluded at Vladivostok Naval Base on July 29th, but the surface of the Pacific Ocean has not been calm for a single day. Knowledgeable observers all understand that this is only the prelude to a more dangerous escalation scenario. Just a few days later, the Russian Pacific Fleet immediately launched massive joint exercises stretching from the Sea of Japan, the Sea of Okhotsk, all the way to the Pacific Ocean. The climax of this show of force took place on August 12 when President Vladimir Putin himself appeared at the heart of the exercise on the deck of the guided missile cruiser Varyag, sending a direct challenge to the West. From the warship's deck, the Kremlin leader accused Tokyo of going astray by imposing sanctions against Russia and reviving sovereignty claims. He firmly asserted that Moscow is not a threat while harshly condemning Japan for unprovoked aggression. This political drama reached its peak on August 13 when Putin set foot on the Kuril Islands as the Russian and Chinese ambassadors in Tokyo unexpectedly issued a powerful joint statement warning the Japanese government. The statement declared the results of World War II inviolable and labeled Tokyo's rearmament program as a serious regional security threat. However, the coordinated show of force between Moscow and Beijing has revealed a deep-seated anxiety surrounding both capitals. Japan's unstoppable process of military remilitarization has been underway since the strategic turning point in 2022, as the land of the rising Sunday has completely shed its image as a nation focused solely on passive self-defense, with the establishment of the Joint Operations Command in 2025 bringing together the three branches of the military. The Army, Navy, and Air Force under a unified command, Japan's self-defense forces have transformed into a flexible war machine with the ability to make rapid attack decisions. By 2026, Tokyo's defense budget reached a record 9 trillion yen, equivalent to about 58 billion USD, by completely rewriting its national security doctrine and officially legalizing its counter-strike capability to launch retaliatory attacks deep into enemy territory. Japan is no longer just holding up a passive defensive shield, but is now ready to draw a sharp deterrent sword. The first tip of this sword is the batch of 400 Tomahawk cruise missiles purchased from the United States. In July 2026, the Aegis destroyer JS Chokai successfully conducted a live-fire test of this missile in the Pacific Ocean. With a range of up to 1,600 kilometers, the Tomahawk gives Tokyo the capability to strike and destroy Russian Far East bases or key coastal targets in China. Even more formidable, vertical launch systems on the new generation stealth submarines of the Taige class, the backbone of Japan's submarine fleet, are also being equipped with this type of missile, creating an invisible and unpredictable strike from the ocean depths. The rise of Japan's military machine does not stop at imported weaponry. Under the leadership of the Mitsubishi Heavy Industries Group, billions of US dollars have been invested in domestic hypersonic weapons research and development programs. On the surface, the rapid production of the Mogami-class multi-role stealth frigates with extremely low radar cross-sections has elevated the asymmetric combat capabilities of the Japanese Navy to new heights. On land,
Tokyo has increased the range of the Type 12 coastal anti-ship missile system to 1,000 km and has begun deploying them along the coast of Hokkaido. Especially, missile positions have been established at strategic points such as the Kamifurano base of the Northern Army, ready to turn any Russian military amphibious landing ambitions into a deadly disaster. Along with the completion of testing of the HVGP hypersonic glide weapon aimed at multiplying the firepower directed at the Kuril Islands chain before the end of 2026, live fire exercises of the Type 88 system in Hokkaido serve as a silent warning. Approach and you will be fired upon. In the skies, Tokyo's technological advantage is even more overwhelming as the Global Combat Air Program KCAP, in cooperation with the UK and Italy, is accelerating to produce 6th-generation stealth fighters ready to completely dominate Russian Su-57 or Chinese J-20 fighters in Pacific airspace. In Hokkaido, Chitose Air Base always maintains its F-15 and F-35 fighter squadrons in a 24/7 combat-ready state. Throughout 2025, they scrambled to intercept hundreds of airspace violations by Russian aircraft. But now, these planes are not just intercepting, they are also armed with long-range JAS-M cruise missiles. The proud symbol of the Japanese Navy, the Izumo-class helicopter carriers have also completed their conversion into true light aircraft carriers, carrying F-35B stealth fighters and extending their operational reach across the vast ocean. The final piece completing this deterrence network is the highly integrated automated defense system featuring thousands of unmanned aerial vehicles on the surface, underwater, and in coordination with long-range MQ-9B Sea Guardian reconnaissance drones. They continuously redraw the battlefield map and transmit target data to Aegis destroyers in real time. This entire massive military transformation precisely explains the motivation behind Vladimir Putin's aggressive pressure on the Kuril Islands. Because the elite personnel and equipment of the Pacific Fleet have been severely depleted to reinforce the brutal battlefield in Ukraine, the Kremlin has been forced to adopt a tactic of creating sudden asymmetric crises to slow down Tokyo's process of weapons transfer and military deployment before this system reaches full operational capability. Putin's deterrent move is very clear: to force Japan to make concessions, reduce sanctions, cut aid to Ukraine, and restrain its alliance with the US. However, instead of backing down in the face of threats, Japan has activated its highest level of military alert, turning Hokkaido and the Northern Territories into one of the most heavily armed and dangerous fault lines on the planet. Standing firmly behind Tokyo on this front line is the massive war machine of the US military. Washington not only flexes its own muscle, but also takes key diplomatic steps, setting aside historical differences to bring Japan and South Korea onto the same front. The trilateral alliance, forged at the Camp David summit, has activated a radar system, sharing integrated target data capable of locating and activating firepower to destroy any missile launch from China or North Korea in just a matter of seconds. At the same time, the Quad, with the participation of India and Australia, is weaving a maritime steel wall across the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean through unprecedented large-scale exercises, squeezing every maneuvering space of the Russia-China alliance right in the strategic maritime areas on the actual battlefield. The largest forward military presence of the United States globally, with about 55,000 stationed troops, serves as a towering steel shield ensuring Japan's security. The core of this deterrent power lies in the infamous 7th Fleet based at Yokosuka Naval Base, where the nuclear-powered supercarrier USS George Washington and its escort strike group are always ready to respond instantly to any coordinated combat actions by the Russia-China alliance. Deep beneath the waters of the first island chain, stealthy Virginia-class nuclear attack submarines continuously patrol like predatory ghosts, closely tracking every move of enemy warships. In the skies, Kadena Air Base in Okinawa maintains its position as an impregnable fortress of the US Air Force in the Pacific, where advanced F-35 and F-15 fighter squadrons are always on red alert, ready to soar into action to lock down the skies over the archipelago. Washington's overwhelming power in this region is not limited to warships and fighter jets. At Misawa Air Base, the permanent presence of unmanned reconnaissance aircraft squadrons, the strategic RQ-4B Global Hawk, has given the alliance the capability to monitor all movements of the Russian and Chinese fleets from near space altitudes. However, the factor that completely changes the battlefield situation is the Typhoon ground-based medium-range missile system, which is being tested at Iwakuni and Kanoya bases. It operates under the command of the US Army's multi-domain task force in the Pacific and is shielded by electronic warfare units capable of blinding enemy radars before launching. The Typhoon system, with its ability to launch both SM-6 multi-purpose surface-to-air missiles and Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles at the same time is reshaping the balance of power in the Asia region, the Pacific, in a way that is completely favorable to the West. Furthermore, the Pentagon continuously sends B-52 strategic bombers from Guam and Hawaii to establish a direct counterbalance to the long-range patrols of Russian bombers, with the Japanese Joint Operations Command establishing a real-time integrated crisis management desk with the US military. Any military adventurism aimed at Tokyo would mean directly triggering a full-scale war with the world's #1 superpower. According to Article 5 of the US-Japan Security Treaty signed in 1960, the United States has a legal obligation to intervene militarily if Japanese territory is attacked. Although the Kuril Islands are outside the direct scope of this treaty, any act of aggression by Russia against the main island of Hokkaido would certainly immediately run into the steel wall of the US-Japan alliance. For that reason, Vladimir Putin's inspection trip to Iturup Island not only angered Tokyo, but also served as a direct provocation to Washington at a time when the Russian military is bogged down in fierce attritional battles on the Western Front against the resilient resistance of Ukrainian forces. The prospect of having to open another massive supply front in the Pacific is truly a logistical nightmare. The Kremlin leader's adventurous move is in fact only indirectly strengthening Xi Jinping's strategic hegemonic position in Asia, gradually pushing Russia deeper into Beijing's shadow of dependence. Meanwhile, North Korea's continuous testing of intercontinental ballistic missiles aimed at overloading the surveillance radar systems of the US and Japan has completed the third piece of a volatile authoritarian axis. However, this reckless gamble by Moscow is revealing itself to be a strategic mistake with an extremely costly price to pay. Now they are no longer facing a passive Tokyo that only responds with mild diplomatic notes. Japan is rising as a true military superpower, independently producing long-range missile arsenals capable of reaching the enemy's command centers. The resolute, uncompromising stance of Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, along with the Japanese self-defense forces' readiness to fight on land, at sea, and in the air, is strong evidence of this historic transformation. The efforts of the Moscow-linked axis,
Beijing and Pyongyang's attempts to tighten the blockade around Japan have actually become a catalyst that binds the Western alliance closer than ever. Major powers like the UK and Italy are working with Tokyo to accelerate the development of next-generation stealth fighters, while reciprocal access agreements signed with the Philippines and Australia have officially paved the way for Japan's self-defense forces to deploy and conduct exercises on partner territories. The strong statements made aboard Mr. Putin's warship have only fueled an unprecedented wave of anti-Russian sentiment among the Japanese public. Tokyo has officially designated Russia's presence in the Northern Territories as a legal occupation and declared that the era of patience has completely ended. Japan's coastal defense missile batteries are now loaded and aimed directly at the Kuril Islands. American nuclear submarines are quietly shadowing Russia's Pacific Fleet beneath the icy waters of the Sea of Okhotsk. Battle-hardened armored brigades in Hokkaido, Aegis cruisers on the surface, and F-35 squadrons in the sky are all deployed and ready for the worst-case scenario. Unsettled historical debts and disregard for international law will eventually have to be addressed. So, in your opinion,
will a major conflict break out in the Pacific?